Friday night in the NBA. Your Run Pure Sports happy hour starts right now. I am JT Hayes. You know what to do, and I know you want to do it. I know you're conflicted about it, but I know you want to. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We get to 300, we stop talking about it. And if you're not already a member, some of you still dragging your feet, head on over to runpuresports.com. Use code NBA15, 15% off of your first month's payment. We have finally a 9-game slate to start off our weekend. Thank you for your service to all the veterans and those of you who are celebrating Veterans Day today. I don't want to not mention that. And I want to go first here to my buddy DC. I am in the nation's capital, DC. I want to talk to DC from DC. I had an early wake-up call this morning, 9 a.m. flight into the nation's capital, DC. And instead of doing the wise thing, going to bed at like 9 o'clock, I needed to go out and watch the Panthers-Bears game last night, Thursday Night Football. Finally got to sleep around 1 a.m. And I will say, DC, this morning at the airport, scrolling through late night Twitter, which is something I really enjoy doing, usually more so on the weekends because our buddy Steve Boynton will sometimes get after it and just start going nuts on Twitter. But I too, DC, would have preferred to watch a live Panther versus the Bear instead of what we saw last night. DC, who do you think wins that? Because I'm kind of on the side of the Panther. Bears are kind of mostly slow and pretty dumb. I think the Panther outsmarts the Bear. Who do you have winning that? How was your week? How is your Friday?
Yeah, a lot going on there. But yeah, yesterday's game, Panthers-Bears, I mean, it's rare for a hyped up game to live up to the hype. And it's also kind of rare for a game that you think is going to be an absolute shit show to, not deliver any goodness whatsoever. But certainly delivered last night. Just a horrendous game. I mean, it's been beaten to death at this point, but how down bad are the Panthers taking Bryce Young over CJ Stroud? Just in trading up to do it, just brutal for Panthers fans. In terms of Panther versus Bear, me and the Snyder Soldier were discussing it on Twitter. I think the Panther defeats the Black Bear, but gets crushed by a Grizzly or a Polar Bear. I'm sure there's other types of bears out there, but those are the big three bears for me. And yeah, out on the trails, which I'm spending a lot of time doing, try not to encounter the mountain lion, the Panther. That's definitely one to avoid. The Black Bear, I've seen a few. You don't need to worry too much about those. So I'll take the Panther over the Black Bear.
So it depends what type of bear is what DC is saying. I'm interested. Snyder usually catches our shows. Snyder, come on in. Let us know who the is.
What bear is best? You guys know? I mean, we got our local Dwight Schrute right over here in DC, mastering all the bears.
He's been out on the trails. DC,
I think the Grizzlies the champ, but Polar.
Most people hate The Office, right? I like The Office, but
yeah,
I feel like. Do you like the? All right, good.
Yeah.
This is a safe place.
I hate The Office. Come on.
So, AP, I want to turn it over to you now. And I mentioned that we have a 9-game slate. First of all, I want your thoughts on who wins, Panther, Bear. And in chat, guys.
I'm having a hard time focusing right now, JT. I mean, you're cleaned up. I look like a bum. I mean.
You guys look great.
I don't know. Like, do I take off my shirt? Do I go get a jacket? I don't know what to do. I hope my wife isn't watching. I don't want her to see the show I'm doing with JT Hayes right here looking as good as he is. I'll be in trouble.
Can we get JT Hayes on the presidential ticket? I feel like I'd, rather vote for someone 30 years younger than our current options. That'd be nice.
I will vote for JT Hayes.
Yeah, Derek will vote for me. A couple of things in chat. One, let us know if you think AP should go shirtless or put on more clothes. And then tell us also what you think Panther versus Bear. Daniel Mardoff is here, always making me laugh. But AP, seriously, as I said, I'm scrolling the early morning Twitter, and one of our other buddies, Sweet Travis Mangone, it's a phrase. We got a lot of phrases around here, but a phrase started by, once again, Steve Boynton. He says, these NBA schedule to start the season has been AIDS. Look, I don't even know if AIDS exists because the great Magic Johnson obviously has found a cure for it. He shared it with the world. But it's been tough going, AP, in the early going. We've got 2 games last night, 14 the day before. It was 4, 12 on Monday. But now we have a nice 9-game slate. Not a lot of injuries. And where there are injury situations, a little bit priced up. But how are you doing this week? What's your first take at this 9-game Friday night slate?
Yeah, I feel like I had the game on last night, the Thursday night football game on, but it was on like the side TV on the main TV. I mean, I was watching NBA. I mean, we had Bucks Pacers and Malik Beasley playing no defense. Actually, that transition was he got stuffed by the rim, which was hilarious, and then he just gets absolutely blown by multiple times actually throughout the game by Tyrese Halliburton. Halliburton is absolutely a stud, but no, it was a fun night. I mean, that game went exactly like we thought it would. A shout out to Snyder, another primetime unders hitting. The primetime under rate is legendary right now. Not as legendary as the Pacers overs. If you haven't been following me or listening to what I've been saying, this Pacers team right now betting overs is almost an auto bet outside of a few matchups or of Halliburton sitting. I think it currently rivals the 2020-21 Pacers team that hit one of the most insane overs numbers that I've ever seen. It was 60% plus rate. It was absolutely insane. I think this team is very similar. I know they're not on the slate tonight, but if you want to make some money, usually 9 out of 10 times it's going to be a good bet to take the Pacers overs. So anyways, I digress. The slate tonight, it looks good. I think it's tricky. I'm excited to break it down with you guys. The heat map is up. The flow chart is up. I'm having a tough time figuring out what I'm going to do at the small forward position. I think that's going to be kind of tricky on the slate, whether you punt it or if you spend up for Gordon Hayward, Jaylen Brown. And then it's one of the best pace environments is a game that's difficult to touch. I mean, this Wizards team, the rotation is terrible. It's AIDS, if that's the word of the day that we're using. I mean, we had Landry Shamet playing 26 minutes off the bench last game, and he hit every three-pointer he took. So they hate Tyus Jones. Delon Wright closed over him. Kyle Kuzma should have nuked. He should have had a 60-piece. They limited him to 31 minutes. And then Jordan Poole is AIDS also. So there you go. We used it plenty of times. The word of the day.
In a sentence, which is absolutely impressive. DC, question for you. Reg Kakut wants to know, DC, what do you do if you encounter a cougar on the trails?
I like the answer that New York Yank fan gave. You ask for their number. I think that's the way to go when you encounter the cougar on the trail. What else are you going to do? You got to take advantage of the puppy who, she makes some good inroads with the ladies. I'll say that.
The puppy is a show stealer and opens the door for DC to go ahead and slam it shut. All right, let's get into this slate. 9 games. We are going to get started, AP, with that game that you talked about. It is a rematch from the other night. LaMelo Ball, a little bit of a disappointment, only 50 fantasy points for his price. He got a huge price jump here tonight, all the way up to 10K. You mentioned the rotation with Washington. Even in a big win, I mean, Jordan Poole didn't do a lot. Tyus, the minutes were all over the place here. Charlotte in Washington. Washington favored by 3, 239.5 total. No major news. Gordon Hayward, probable. Of course, Rozier, Bouknight, and Miles Bridges is still suspended. Nothing on the Wizards, AP. That means that all of the bodies that they have are available to go ahead and be used at the discretion of the head coach. What do you see here?
So here's how I'm handling the Wizards. It's going to be a lot of rule creation because I don't think you can just completely eliminate them in multi-entry formats. I think that's the wrong approach. I do think you got to be careful about how you handle the situation. We saw Danilo Gallinari come off the bench and just absolutely stroke it, which he does every 4 or 5 games. Once out of 5 times he does it. He put 29.5 DK points. It's all about matchups, it seems like. I don't really understand. I think Wes Unseld Jr., I think is his name. I don't necessarily understand kind of what his philosophy is yet and what he's trying to do. We know a couple of things. We know they don't like Jordan Poole, and not many of us do. Can Jordan Poole still get there? What would need to happen? Honestly, it has to be he has to come out hot, and he has to offensively.
He's got to make 3 or 4 of his first 5 shots.
Because the liability is on the defensive end. And the first half rotation, The reason I think they stuck with those guys in the second half is I think they limited to Charlotte like to 17 points. And I think it was the second quarter. The game still went over, by the way, even though, Charlotte was held to 17 points, which is insane to hit an over when a team only scores 17 in one quarter. So that just shows you tonight where I'm at. We all know I'm on the overs in that game. I think it's on the Wizards side. It's Kyle Kuzma. I think he's a strong play at 8K here. Again, minutes are a risk. And I think I'm fine in MME formats if like a few of these guys, these bench players, fall into a few of my builds, and especially at the small forward position. So that's kind of how I'm handling it. And then, LaMelo Ball, the usage was there. He's going to play, like he was on pace to play 39 minutes. They're a disaster without him in there. He put up 34 raw points, 36% usage rate, 7 assists, only 4 rebounds. I think all the metrics are there on this slate to make him a fine play once again. And then it's Gordon Hayward. And then PJ Washington was interesting as well. They rotate. So like Mark Williams got into foul trouble. It seems like they don't trust Nick Richards as much. So we saw some PJ Washington at the 5. I think those guys are fine. I think Mark Williams, too, centers against this Washington. I think he's going to be a very, very low-owned tournament play that we can go to. So good game environment, tough game from a rotation standpoint.
Yeah, especially if and you mentioned the small forward position a little bit thin. You're sitting there looking at, can Corey Kispert at 4,300 on DraftKings do something here? But the reality is, DC, can he get the minutes? And I'm looking at this game, and I see really, really nice prices for Jordan Poole, who's done absolutely nothing, and his minutes have been all over the place. Tyus Jones hasn't done a whole lot, but his minutes have been all over the place. And I'm looking at it like, hey, I've got LaMelo Ball, sure, 10K. Maybe that brings his ownership down a little. And then both centers, Mark Williams, 6,300, Daniel Gafford, 5,300, both of them getting into foul trouble. The rule of thumb last season, when teams did this new back-to-back thing that the NBA has done with scheduling, is the players who had really good games game 1 were busting in game 2, and the players who did not well in game 1 had really good games in game 2. Is this a spot where we could see a Gafford versus Williams possession by possession, and all of a sudden at the end of the night, these two guys are your 7X centers on the slate? What are your thoughts here, Washington and Charlotte?
Yeah, I think that scenario is possible. I think really anything in this game is possible. The one thing you're pretty damn sure of is you're certain it's going to be fast paced. This game was just flying in the matchup. I believe that was Wednesday. Went over the total. It's got a 240 total again. I think it goes over once again today. In terms of the minutes from last game, a site that I use a lot, I've talked about, a popcorn machine. You can look up, when players subbed in and out of games, and you can see the score, foul trouble, all that stuff, just for each game. What happened in this game, it was pretty close early on. The Washington bench came in, 7-8 minutes into the game and just took over the game. And so they got to stay out there, right? Like you saw DeLon Wright, Koulibaly play, 12, 13 minutes because they were beating the brakes off of Charlotte. And so they left him out there. Then the second half, Wizards were still winning. And kind of the same thing happened. The starters struggled a little bit against Charlotte, the Wizards did. And then the backups came in and did it again, and the starters never came back into the game. So you saw, really the floor in minutes for guys like Tyus Jones, like Jordan Poole, who played 20 minutes each. Listen, could that happen again? Absolutely. JT, you mentioned it doesn't really seem to normally be the case where we see the exact same game play out twice in a row when we get these back-to-backs. And frankly, the regular season back-to-back is kind of a new thing, but obviously we've got a long history of seeing playoff series. And you guys know there's like a zigzag theory in the playoffs, right? Where you kind of play one game and then you go the other side on the line on the other because teams adjust, right? And player performance, especially in the NBA, where it's such a make or miss league, right? It just really kind of depends on if your shot's falling or not for a lot of these players, especially a guy like Jordan Poole listen, the minutes floor is obviously not there for guys like Tyus Jones, Jordan Poole, Gafford, even Kuzma to some extent. But if you're talking tournaments, right? If you're talking trying to win a tournament field of 3,000 or 10,000 or 30,000 teams, are you really that concerned about the floor of the players? I think it's a mistake, a little bit of a mistake, to be overly concerned about the floor. The ceiling is what I want. And I think the ceiling is still there for these Wizards guys, including Poole, Tyus Jones. Nobody's going to want to play these guys after what happened last game. I was on them. I'm going to jump back on board this game. I still think this game is an amazing game stack. I still think it could easily go the way of the Wizards starters this game. And in fact, I think that's still the most likely thing, despite what we saw last game. So I'm back on board here. Charlotte side, LaMelo leads the way, but I think PJ Washington, Gordon Hayward, Brandon Miller, Mark Williams, could even play Nick Richards off the bench. I think all those guys are pretty good plays. And for me, it's going to be the main guys, the starters for Washington that I like. Tyus, Kuzma, Jordan Poole. I hope the starters play better in this game, get the minutes. And I still think the majority of the time, that's what you're going to see. Tyus, Jordan Poole get there 30, 35. We've seen games where they've got close to 40 minutes when they're playing well. And I think that's just as likely as not. So, yes, these guys do have more risk than you typically want to take on for, the $7,400 price tag you see for Jordan Poole. But, I still think he's got 40 real, raw point, easy upside. I think we're going to see that from multiple games from him this year. This looks like a good spot for it. I'm back in on this game, and I'll take the lower ownerships after, obviously, it kind of flamed out a little bit last time out.
For such a high total, seeing these guys, obviously some recency bias involved, right? And they're low single digits for Jordan Poole.
If this game just smashed on Wednesday, right, these ownerships would be triple, 5 times of what they are going to be tonight for the low-owned guys. People are still going to play LaMelo Ball at $10K, which I get. I mean, he seems like a really strong play, even with the price tag to me.
Right, exactly. They're going to be off of these other guys on the Wizards. And to your point, look, that game goes a little bit differently, and then the bench doesn't get all the minutes. And you're going to see that from time to time throughout the long NBA season. All right, we will move on in just a moment. Hit the like button, 286. We need to get to, well, we said 300, but we'll see if we get to more than 300 viewers. We'll keep an honest ratio. We'll let AP decide it in the middle of the show, how many likes we need to give out the plays of the day. Brandon McNair, Benair, I hope you're doing okay. If it gets too bad, head to the physician, please. And it looks like he's also having a conversation with himself in the chat, which is always interesting to see when a crazy person goes off the rails. The next game that we are looking at is the Brooklyn Nets heading into Boston. Boston favored by 12, 227.5 total. Cam Johnson is back, DC, but Ben Simmons is out. Al Horford is out. Niehaus Queta remains out for Boston, otherwise fully healthy. Anything you like in this game? Not a bad spread, but that high total, Boston at home. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, Boston favored by 12 points here. So some blowout risk. We know Boston, arguably, I think the best starting 5 in the league right now. That's kind of bearing out in the numbers. If you look at the plus minus per lineups, they're just absolutely dominating everybody with the starting 5. A little bit worried about Brooklyn here going into Boston. I think Brooklyn's had a relatively easy schedule. And then they obviously got to go on the road for one of the toughest games that you can have. Makes me lower on this game overall. Boston, I mean, yeah, Horford out. That doesn't change a ton for the starters, in my opinion. Maybe a little higher minute security for a guy like Porzingis, you could say, but it's not changing a whole lot. I think most of the Boston guys are reasonable plays, but I don't really see anything there on a 9-game slate that I want to lock into early. So I'm mostly off this game from both sides, unless we get unexpected news. I'll probably be looking elsewhere. The Cam Johnson, you sub him in for Ben Simmons. I think the minutes should be about the same, obviously different players, but in terms of their effect on the players around them, I think mostly neutral there. So I didn't see anything in this game that I'm super interested in.
Cam Johnson, 5,100 on DraftKings. I want that cat points out, and he's correct, that Cam Thomas is also out. Cam Thomas is out, as well as Ben Simmons. Of course, Johnson back. Thomas was not starting when Johnson was in AP. Anything you see here, Brooklyn in Boston?
Yeah, so I mean the Nets are getting pretty thin. We saw, I mean, Spencer Dinwiddie just, man, he's having such a bad year. We saw him get outplayed by Dennis Smith Jr. Off the bench last game. I mean, talk about like the James Harden effect on a team. I mean, like tell me that. All right, so this squad from the Nets, it was Lonnie Walker, Dennis Smith Jr., Trendon Watford, and Day'Ron Sharpe. They were the key four guys in that second rotation with Mikal Bridges and Mikal Bridges and I think Dinwiddie or Cam Thomas. Cam Thomas in the first half, he got hurt in the second half. But basically rotating in with that second unit, being kind of that starter with that unit. They outplayed the likes of James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George. I mean, it was absolutely insane to see. They got the dub in that game. And so what I'm getting at is I don't see how, without Cam Thomas in there, that's a lot of offense that they're not going to have. One, if the game stays close, I think it has to be due to Mikal Bridges having a big game. Remember this last year, Cam Thomas was not a starter with them. He had some monster games. He had that stretch, I believe it was when Dinwiddie got hurt, where he absolutely nuked. That's when we all got introduced to Cam Thomas. And so now we're in that same situation where it was, and if you remember, it was Mikal Bridges that had those monster games. So if the game stays close, I think Mikal is someone that you have to consider. If not, you got to be considering the Trendon Watfords, Day'Ron Sharpe, kind of the second unit, because they would be the ones gobbling up all those minutes down the stretch, playing the blowout run, etc. So it's kind of a tough game for the starters. Like I'm under maybe fading Dinwiddie. He hasn't looked right. Cam Johnson's going to be back, but you have to think that he's going to be on a minutes limit. So I can't really get there. And then it's Royce O'Neal and Dorian Finney-Smith have been playing good, but I think their price is fully adjusted. And, at 5'7", 5'6", we want that 40-ish type of upside that we talk about. So I'm really torn on them. On the Boston side, I'm with DC. Too many mouths to feed here. I think it's a rule situation. I'm limiting it to one or two max of Boston players. Derek White, a fine play. Drew Holiday due to price. Like I think Drew Holiday, due to that 6.6K price tag, might be overowned, to be honest. And so that's someone I'm going to be very careful with the projection on. And then I go back to that small forward spot. And if you look at it, if you pull up the heat map over on Rumpier Sports, it's tough going at the small forward spot. So if you put like a Tatum's going to be very low owned. If you put him or a Mikal Bridges in that spot, it's going to make you different on the slate. And that could create enough separation at that position. I mean, Jason Tatum's been like an automatic for hitting 50+ each and every slate. So that's something I'm also considering. But the risk here is the game blowing out for sure.
Definitely blowout risk. And that is a situation where you'd be looking at the Trendon Watfords of the world. A little bit tougher game. I agree. The prices look enticing on Drew Holiday and Derek White. But then you consider, all right, what do they really need to get there when you've got 5 scorers in that Boston Celtics lineup? Seems like a little bit of roulette there in terms of who is going to get the big game. All right. We will move on to the next game. We are Minnesota at San Antonio.
We forgot Philly, right? Philly, Detroit?
Yeah, we did.
It's coming up. No? I don't know.
No, I will listen to you. I think it's 7 Eastern game.
We'll go back.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
We'll go back. We'll do that next.
I'm throwing JTAs off right now. I love it.
That's right. I usually like to skip a game because the people will catch it.
Keep them honest.
Yeah. And then I say, well, we'll go back to that game when we get the right number of likes. And so you have to create an incentive, AP, for people to hit the like button. And sometimes that means completely skipping over a game that is a little bit interesting here. Now, you've got Philadelphia in Detroit, Philly favored by 9, 224.5 total for Detroit. Alec Burks and Jaden Ivey remain out, as is Monty Morris. Nick Batum, the great Nick Batum, AP, is probable here tonight. Looks like a smash spot for the Sixers. Last season, Sixers on the road, these games stayed a lot closer than you would see them get at home. What are your thoughts here, Philly in Detroit?
Yeah, so I'm kind of with you. So when you look at the total, it's been a little like when I've been monitoring it throughout the day, and I'm like, why aren't they favored by double digits? And coming off a really big win, obviously against Boston, a team that's really owned them over the last couple seasons, and they did it without James Harden. And a lot of the talk there is like this team looks good. I'll be honest. And teams without Harden, in my opinion, right now tend to look pretty good. I think James Harden is just overvalues himself and doesn't realize that he's on the decline. Like we all talked about it all last year. Maxey is a better player. He's a better player than James Harden. And you see it. You're seeing it with this Philly team right now. They're playing with a lot of pace. Harden doesn't play with pace. And I think that was impacting them. It was taking away a lot of what they're good at. When Philly is pushing it and put in transition, I think they're a better team. And now they have wings in there that make them, I think, pretty dangerous. Kelly Oubre has been playing really good, but then you got Batum and you got Robert Covington off the bench. So like down the road, if you're a Philly fan, you should be pretty excited right now because when it comes to different matchups with different teams, they have a lot of things that they can do. It just comes down to Maxey staying healthy. And I mean, the guy is an absolute stud. I faded him against Boston. He played 39 minutes and absolutely nuked. It was probably a bad fade last game. So what I'm getting at, if this game stays close, I think a few of these Philly plays are really interesting. I think now Joel Embiid going up against Jalen Duren, Embiid is matchup proof. I mean, let's be honest. But Jalen Duren, very, very good defender, and he's been a stud this year, so it's going to be a tougher matchup. I'm fine going right back to Maxey. Maxey's not going to – I mean, Killian Hayes is a pretty good defender also, but I think we're going to see some plays in this game get there as long as it stays close. And then if you go to the Detroit side, we have a much – and I'm still adjusting to this also, but the Pistons, we have a much tighter rotation. You're starting to see it. Obviously, with the new coach, new staff and everything, things are changing there. So I think a guy like Cade Cunningham could absolutely go off against this Philly team if it stays close. 8.4K. He's going to be very, very low owned because Desmond Bane, a guy that has all the usage right now and is going to chalk against Utah that we'll talk about later, I think is in a little bit better of a spot. But Cade can rack up the peripherals too. It seems like a spot where he could go off. And then you got Marcus Sasser. The price is already adjusted enough though, so it makes him tough to play. But he's been awesome off the bench. And then you got Thompson, who's 6'9", at that small forward position. I again think is a fine play. He's just playing tons and tons of minutes. So I think it's going to be a sneaky game that goes overlooked by a lot of people that could get you different enough in tournaments to make the difference tonight.
DC, Cade Cunningham coming off a big game against the Bucks. DeAnthony Melton, just 5,300. He is playing close to 30 minutes, 1 for 9 shooting in that tough matchup against the Celtics. Could be a bounce back spot here for him. And Tyrese Maxey, have to give credit. He was your play of the day the other night when he had that big game. What are you seeing here? Philadelphia visiting the Pistons.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough good things about Tyrese Maxey. I think he's a true star in this league. And I mean, there's something to be said, like he's just a player. You just feel so good about the floor ceiling combination. I know just talk about maybe floor not being as important in tournaments, still obviously a plus to have it. And I think he's got a really, really nice night to night floor. The minutes are just never going anywhere outside of, blowout circumstances, but he's never in foul trouble, anything like that. It's just, he's going to be a big performer night to night. And man, I think he's underpriced at 8,100 compared to some of the other guys in that price range. Talking about guys with minutes risk, guys who aren't performing on a huge basis from night to night. Maxey is absolutely getting it done at 8,100. Obviously an overly simplistic thing to do, but if you just divide by just simple fantasy points per game, which ultimately is what we're talking about in DFS, right? Divided by salary, Maxey is crushing it night in and night out. And I don't think he's going to be slowed down by this Detroit backcourt. Obviously a younger backcourt with Cunningham, Hayes, Sasser. So I think Maxey is my favorite play on the Sixers, followed by Embiid. I think Embiid, pretty tough to fit in tonight. Like you really got to kind of build your whole lineup around him. and I don't see a ton of cheap value I love. I think that's a trend that we've seen this year and in the last couple of years from DraftKings. There's just not that many good sub 4K players like there used to be. I know you guys have been playing NBA DFS a long time. There used to be on a Friday night slate like 5, 6, 7, 3K guys, sometimes actually 3K that you could fit in. Just not the case anymore, which I do think makes it a more fun game, but it does make it harder to play guys like Embiid. You just need a monster performance to make up for the lack of value. Maxey, and then listen, the Detroit backcourt, like they are so thin right now. Obviously, Ivy and Burks are out from the rotation from the start of the year. They're also missing two guys they were counting on to play big minutes at the guard positions, Joe Harris and Bogdanovich. Those guys, they haven't played yet this season, I don't think. But, the point is, they really only have three guys for the point guard, shooting guard minutes. Obviously, Hayes and Cunningham in the starting lineup, and then Sasser coming in to relieve both of those guys. But, they've got to play, the three of them combined for at least the 96 available minutes for those two positions. So I think those guys are safe. We've seen some big games from Cunningham. I think I would go Hayes over Sasser tonight. We saw Sasser kind of take over in the second half last game, but I think most of the time it'll be Hayes who gets the majority of the minutes. He's playing pretty well this year too. So yeah, I like the backcourt. Maxey on the Philly side, and then I do like all three guys, all three members of the backcourt for the Pistons. I think I would rank them Cunningham 1, Hayes 2, Sasser 3.
You mentioned it, DC. Tough to get in some of these higher price players. That's why you're seeing people asking about guys like Trendon Watford, which, unless it's a blowout, is a pretty thin play. If you're playing for the blowout, okay, we get it. You play Watford at 3,600. But we may get some value here in the Memphis game because Zaire Williams is questionable. Jake LaRavia is doubtful, and that would open up maybe David Roddy at 3,700 at the small forward position, AP, which you've talked about as being difficult against the Utah Jazz. So there's something to watch for later on in the night. Obviously, you'll have to plan for that and build if that's the way that you want to work and try and find that value later. We will move on now and go to Minnesota at San Antonio. Minnesota favored by 7, 225 total. And DC, will stick with you, your Timberwolves, your former team, maybe your current team. Again, the lack of value, the lack of injuries makes some of these guys on both of these teams. We know about the Greg Popovich rotation. And with Minnesota, it's just everybody's healthy. So for me, I'm looking at it like, well, maybe it's Anthony Edwards or nothing. And then I'm thinking about, well, can Karl Anthony Towns finally have a good game? He's had enough stinkers. His price is low now. What are your thoughts here? Minnesota hosting San Antonio.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've sworn off the Timberwolves over the last half decade or so, only to be brought back in once again. And they're trying to do it earlier on this year. They're playing really good ball. One of the top defenses in the league. They've been pretty much fully healthy. At least their stars have been to start the year. And I do expect them to control this game, to win in San Antonio. It's just kind of hard to pay these prices. I really haven't played many Timberwolves so far this year because they have been healthy. Anthony Edwards, I think, has taken another step forward. He's been great, worth the $9K price tag for sure. He's probably my favorite player on the Timberwolves. Really, the only guy I'm truly considering. Towns at 8,200 with this current starting lineup, I think is just a little bit overpriced. I don't see the ceiling, and I know they're different positions, but just to kind of compare him to a guy like Maxey, right? Like Maxey's outscoring this guy every single night, and Towns is $100 more. So I can't get to a guy like him. And then on the Spurs side, I really don't want to pick on this Wolves team right now with opposition players. I haven't played a ton of Spurs outside of mixing in some Wembanyama just for that massive ceiling. I don't think this is the spot for him against. I think he's going to have to guard Karl Towns. I think there's some serious foul trouble risk there. That said, nobody's going to play him, and I do think he's got just tremendous upside in any matchup. So he would be my favorite Spur, but I'm pretty low on this game overall.
Fair enough. And I tend to agree, AP, because on the one hand, you've got a fully healthy Minnesota Timberwolves team. You've got a pretty large spread here with San Antonio visiting in Minnesota. And then you have the Spurs rotation, Devin Vassell playing 12 minutes the other night in his first game back after a few games out. You're dealing with Popovich mixing in guys. It just doesn't seem like on a 9-game slate a place that I want to target. Of course, all other players are going to be thinking the same thing. I just can't see if I could find anything that I love on the San Antonio side. What are you thinking about this game?
Yeah, so, the issue is, all right, so a few things. One, the rotation on the Spurs side is obviously always going to be very difficult. The matchup, I agree with DC. I mean, the Timberwolves, one of the best defenses out there right now. But the Spurs play with a lot of pace. And so I do think some of these Wolves players could definitely get there. It's just figuring out who. It's a great spot for power forwards. I think it was you, DC, the last when the Knicks played the Spurs. Someone was on Randall from was it your play of the day?
No, it wasn't me.
It was all right. Someone was on.
The Optos were pretty Optos.
Okay.
Our projections were pretty high on Randall. I think he ended up with 53, 54 fantasy points, something like that.
54. Brunson had like 40. RJ Barrett had 40 as well. So, and you've seen it. If you just look back, even reserves, like this Spurs team has given up a ton of points to bench players and to starters. And so what I'm getting at, if the game gets a little out of hand, I think it could. Maybe Spurs being at home definitely helps. But I think it's a tough spot for Victor Wembanyama. I'm going to be off of him. The price is just a little high there. Again, I mean, could this guy absolutely nuke? He definitely could. But I do think with how big this Timberwolves team is, I mean, maybe a little bit tougher of a spot for him with Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns, Naz Reid coming off the bench. I think they're just going to throw a lot of bodies off of him or at him. I think it's a spot where you look at Naz Reid, you look at Kyle Anderson, these guys off the bench that maybe get additional run. And then Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards is always going to be a tournament play for me. There's a lot of mouths to feed on this team right now, but this dude is incredible. If you're a Wolves fan, I think you should be obviously really excited. I mean, this dude's a star. So the one thing I will also say is Mike Conley's going to hit a lot of builds. So if you're multi-entering, he's a cash play, in my opinion. He's the perfect cash play. I haven't looked at it yet. If I pull up the cash chart over at Run Pure Sports, I guarantee Mike Conley's going to be on there, and he's probably going to be like a core cash chart type play. I don't know if I see the upside in Mike Conley. Like if he gets me 28, 30 points, I don't think that's going to be enough on this slate at 4.8. So I'm going to slightly under-project him. I'm not fading him. I'm slightly under-projecting him. I'd much rather prefer the players that have upside. And Anthony Edwards is one of those players. So if the game stays close, I do think he could smash.
Conley is cheap, but we know how a popular Mike Conley usually works out, and it's not a very happy ending. Hit the like button. We've got 393 watching at 110. AP, I said mid-show, so after this next game, think about it. We're going to need to give a number here. And
what are the likes at right now?
They're at 110.
Okay.
All right. Jacob Stubbs is in. Welcome, Jacob Stubbs. Richie Smalls, Kevin Clunan, James Forstrom is in here. Thank you all for watching. Make sure that you do hit that like button so we can get to the plays of the day. All right. The next game, I'm trying to make sure that I stay in sequence here, AP. It is New Orleans at Houston. Houston favored by 1.5. Fairly big news here because Alperen Şengün is questionable. That would open up and make Jabari Smith Jr. a better play. It would make Tari Eason, who I think is already a decent play at 3,800, would make him maybe more in consideration. On the Pelicans side, Zion Williamson is going to return to the lineup. How exciting for Zion. Najee Marshall is out. Herb Jones is questionable. And, of course, they are going to be without C.J. McCollum for some time. AP, New Orleans at Houston.
Yeah, so starting with Zion, I mean, when Zion's in, I fade Joval. It's just they do not work well on the court together. And if Şengün is out, just looking at this team, they don't have a lot of bodies that, they could stop a guy like Zion. We've seen Dylan Brooks. Dylan Brooks, as much hate as we all give him, and rightfully so, because he's kind of a douchebag. He's been good this year, and he's filled his role. And like Ime Udoka must have this guy. I mean, this dude is so corny, so cheesy. I don't know if you guys saw the highlights. He was just staring LeBron down pre-game for like 8 minutes straight, just like tracking him like everywhere on the court. And that's, I mean, maybe it's a bit, and if so, I mean, it's kind of funny actually, but he locked him up.
They then waxed the Lakers. So
yeah, we're on. I mean, it helped that AD got rolled out, but we're on that side. But yeah, they absolutely waxed the Lakers. And what I'm getting at is he would most likely have the Brandon Ingram assignment, making Brandon Ingram's life tough. So for me, it's like, okay, if Şengün is out, who's going to stop Zion Williamson? I think it's a sneaky Zion spot. Coming off injuries or rest, people are always shy to play these type of players. And Zion, it's not like he's shown a ton of upside this year, but we finally have no CJ McCollum. If we assume Brandon Ingram has a tougher matchup here, I think Zion is somewhat interesting. So I'm looking at him on the Pelicans side, and then on the Rockets side, if Şengün's out, I like Jalen Green quite a bit. I like Jalen Green either way. The guy, when he's in there, he's just going to absolutely fire away, and he's been playing really good. I will say this they've been playing very, very good defense. They're not playing with a lot of pace either. I think you could play, just like you said, the Tari Easons as a value, kind of punting that small forward spot. I also think Sean Tate at 3.6 is a fine play. Outside of that, you can go to Fred VanVleet, you can go to Jalen Green, and then it's just waiting for the Şengün news.
Did you see, AP, we mocked him the other night. We mocked Zion Williamson going into Denver, and then he played like someone trying to make his freshman high school basketball team. I mean, it wasn't pretty, but he was chasing, he was running, he was dunking, and he's a very, very big man, DC.
So real quick, let me say one thing. So, Alex, I get what you're saying, but there's 2 games this year where he's been a few peripheral stats away from a triple-double. And if we assume no CJ McCollum, the offense, and if we assume Brandon Ingram is going to have a tough assignment, I don't know. I think the offense flows through Zion here. So I disagree with the fact that he would need 40 raw points to get there tonight.
All right, DC, New Orleans, Houston. It is a close spread, 1.5. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so obviously a lot depends on the Şengün news. For the Houston side, I'm really not all that interested in them unless Şengün sits. So, yeah, I guess this analysis will kind of be just assuming that, because if he is in, I probably won't be really playing much Houston at all. But if Şengün does sit, I think Jabari Smith potentially is a good play. I think he's going to have to guard Zion in this one. I mean, even if Şengün plays, I just don't think he's a center, right? He'll be on the Pelican center, who's ever in there. And I think it would have to be Jabari Smith. I think the Rockets would pretty much have to match Zion's minutes with Jabari Smith. And if you look at the Rockets, they've been in kind of shockingly, they've blown out their opponent in the last 3 games. They also got blown out a couple times. So the Rockets have had kind of a weird start to the season where they've had a lot of lopsided games. I don't really take anything from that other than just kind of blind luck, right? There's going to be one of the 32 teams that has a bunch of blowouts in the first 10 games. It looks like it's probably the Rockets who have had that more than anyone else. So you do see looks like lower minutes for a lot of these Rockets guys, but I'm not really sure that's applicable going forward. And especially if Şengün sits, I could see the Rockets playing this whole game could go small, right? Because we know the Pelicans like to play, they obviously play Nance at the 5 when Valanciunas is off. He's a small ball 5. Could even potentially go to Zion at the 5. And in Houston, if they're missing Şengün, their only backup 5 that they play, their only traditional backup 5 that they play is Jock Landale, who they don't seem to like all that much. So you could see some Jabari Smith minutes at the 5 as well, which would boost his projection. And obviously the pace of this game would go up at that point too. So he's the guy I like most from the Rocket side. I like him either way, but definitely a bigger bump if Şengün is out. Tari Eason, people that played DFS all year last year know that he had some runs of games where he was very, very DFS viable for long stretches, a really good point per minute producer. We am concerned about the minutes. I haven't seen if there's a hard cap on him. Played 14 in his last game, but that was coming back from a stress fracture, which I assume would be one of the injuries that you have to ramp up slowly from, right? Because the very nature of the injury is it's like an overuse type of injury. So I would think it's going to be, 14, then 16, then 18, then maybe, after 5-6 games, the cap is lifted and you can play in the mid-20s. So listen, value's a little thin, 3,800, I get it. But I have a hard time playing guys who I think are capped at I think a max of 20 minutes with no upside for more. That's a little bit of a tough pill for me personally to swallow. I think I'd probably rather go to Jason Tate, because at least if things go well for him, he can get you upper 20s in minutes. I just don't think that's even possible right now for Tari Eason. But yeah, Jabari Smith Jr., my favorite play on Houston. Pelican side, I don't mind going to Zion here. 8,800, I've been kind of off him to start the year, but I don't hate it. Obviously with the McCollum injury, and we'll see with Herb Jones, that would potentially open up even more minutes for Zion and some of these other Pelicans frontcourt guys.
Jones was out against the Denver Nuggets and likely led to a couple of those extra minutes for Zion in that game, which wasn't all that bad. DC, we'll stick with you. Utah heading into Memphis. Memphis is favored by 5, 229.5. The news here on the Memphis side, Xavier Tillman is still out. Bismack Biyombo playing 29 and 30 minutes in his stead. Derrick Rose is going to be out. Jake LaRavia doubtful, and John Conchar and Zaire Williams questionable, as I mentioned earlier, meaning perhaps we get some value with David Roddy in a good matchup against the Utah Jazz. What are your thoughts here, Utah and Memphis?
Yeah, good spot for Memphis. Utah playing fast, not playing much defense. Memphis, this game's got a 230 total. Memphis favored by 5. So you put their team total at what? Close to 120 points in this one. Biyombo, I think he was signed off the street once kind of the Memphis injuries hit with Steven Adams and Tillman. I mean, he's looked good through 2 games. We know he's not the highest upside guy in the world, but 30 and 26 minutes in those 2 games, despite some foul trouble at 4,900 in a good matchup. I do got to think Bismack Biyombo at 4,900 is firmly in play. They've been very, very reluctant to go to Kenny Lofton, and frankly, they don't have a lot else. They can play Jaren Jackson at the 5, but they don't seem to want to do so because they're thin elsewhere too, right? So you put Jackson at the 5 and you kind of stretch it even further. So I think Biyombo is going to get close to 30 minutes again in a great matchup, especially with the way Utah plays. I mean, I know Walker Kessler's out, but they're still playing pretty big with Markkanen, Collins, Kelly Olynyk, all those guys. So yeah, I think Biyombo is certainly a reasonable, value center play with, some upside. I think he's got a pretty good chance at 30 fantasy points here. So I do like him quite a bit for Memphis. And then we'll see what happens on the wing with guys like Zaire Williams, Conchar. If those guys are out, depending on what the starting lineup is, Roddy at 3.7, I think would be a pretty reasonable value play. They don't got a lot else there, right? Like they're getting pretty thin. Luke Kennard, but I don't love that at 4,300. So yeah, Biyombo, my favorite play here. And then some of the Memphis wings could potentially be in play depending on who's out for them. Utah, I don't see a ton. John Collins, he just keeps putting up what AP, we kind of make fun of. It's like 25 to 35 every single game. It's just not enough. It's not enough at 6,500, right? Like, sure, he's a reasonable cash game play. He's not going to get the job done on a 9-game slate at that price point. Kelly Olynyk, I think, will come off the bench again. I don't think he gets enough minutes at 5,400. So, yeah, I don't like the Memphis or the Utah side, rather, all that much. Probably looking more toward the Grizzlies here.
11 minutes for Kelly Olynyk in that matchup. Simply not enough. No Walker Kessler, so making it a good matchup for the Grizzlies. AP, what's the number? We've got 431 watching. The number to hit for the Grizzlies today.
225? Is that fair? What are we at right now?
Fine with that.
It's nice day, or it's Friday. We'll be nice.
Yeah, a little bit magnanimous, if you will. Richie Smalls says, "Give me good old Saint Santi Aldama." AP Aldama.
That's the guy I want to talk about.
Aldama, would you believe, was in the winner of the $15 contest the other night at literally 0.3% ownership. And the player also had Kyle Lowry, so it seems like it was a guy who just clicked a bunch of buttons and things worked out. But what are you thinking about here with the Utah Jazz and the Memphis Grizzlies?
So I had him on the heat map that day, and the only thing that kept two things kept me off of him. It was the price, like the 4.8 price tag, and then the matchup. And I'm just like, it's a big slate. Like, I don't think we need to go here. The opportunity was insane, 5 for 14 from the field, so he didn't shoot very well. But the key here is, who did they close with in clutch time in a game that they could have won against the Heat? It was Jaren Jackson at the 5, Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, Luke Kennard, and then Santi Aldama. So he got, 27, 28 minutes? I think it's a good spot for him. I'm going I think Aldama fully in play. Bismack Biyombo is perfectly fine. I just think, and I don't know. Like, I feel like maybe he's right there with like the Mike Conleys as like a good, safe cash play. You're going to get the floor from him. The position eligibility that Santi gives you, being power forward, and you can play him forward and utility, I think gives him a little bit more value, if you want to call it that. But I think I have the over in this game. I think it's a great game to target. The pace is going to be very nice. And Utah, they're one of the worst defensive teams right now. I mean, they are insanely bad defensively. So Desmond Bane, I think he's going to chuck. I think he's going to take like 25 shots. He's fully in play. I think it's a perfect matchup for Jaren Jackson. I know he's a guy that tilts all of us, and we might be tilting him tonight. I have, I should knock on wood. I have a core play tag on him on the heat map right now, and it's always it makes me nervous when I do that, because he's a guy that can just absolutely tilt all of us with the foul trouble that he gets in. But I think he knows now that he has to be. They're so thin. This Grizzlies team is so thin. He has to be careful when he's out there. He can't just go and hack everyone, because they're going to struggle with that. So for me, I like this game. I think Luke Kennard is a good play. I think Santi Aldama in tournaments is a strong play. Jaren Jackson and Desmond Bane are kind of core guys that I'm looking at. And I think the Marcus Smarts and Bismack Biyombo are also fine plays. Keep an eye on Williams. He is obviously questionable. And then I don't know about you guys, like George is like, these Utah guys, I mean, their rotation is as bad as the Wizards. So they're one of those, the rotation's horrible. Like Colin Sexton, if you want to punt, if you just need a punt value, I think is okay, but you're going to get 20 minutes out of them. And so that's obviously a risky move there. So I want to limit my exposure to Utah for sure here.
Any need for a Utah run back? Richie Smalls, 2320 sounds like no, AP. Sounds like you both, and I as well for that matter, really not interested in this Utah team despite the spread.
Yeah, I'm with you there. You don't have to run it back in NBA. I mean, if you want to, it's fine. But Utah is a team that, like, look, people are going to click on, like, I could see Jordan Clarkson being overowned. Keep in mind, Indiana is the nut matchup. They play with an insane amount of pace. I think the pace is going to be good in this game, but if he gets hot, they're just going to throw Marcus Smart on him, and it's going to be a tougher matchup. So just be careful with Jordan Clarkson there at 6'4".
Real quick on the run back thing with NBA, I do think like full game stacking is certainly a viable strategy. You're kind of hoping for the overtime, because if you get 6 guys with the extra overtime, that's a huge boon. But like the run back is a NFL DFS term, right? Because there is real correlation. If quarterback and wide receiver go off, the other team's got to be in catch-up mode, and their game plan changes, right? They become much more pass-heavy in that situation. The NBA is not really like that. It doesn't really affect the other team if one team is going off and putting up a bunch of points. It's not like the opposing team can all of a sudden run a much faster pace or change their game plan or anything like that. So in general, like you said, AP, I would be not worrying about running stuff back in NBA pretty much at all. outside of kind of the full game stack, which I am an advocate of that. But like getting one run back from Utah just because you're on 2 or 3 Memphis guys, I don't think is necessary at all.
Perfect example of that is the other night, that Charlotte-Washington game that we talked about, where, sure, Kyle Kuzma had a nice game, but a massive rotation leads to a wide distribution of fantasy points, and therefore not necessary to target one of those guys. Our next game, only got a couple of games left to go, so we do need to get to that 225 number here. AP will stick with you. The Los Angeles Clippers, the aforementioned James Harden bringing his rodeo show to Dallas. The Clippers in Dallas. Dallas favored by 1, 236.5 total. Maxi Kleber is doubtful. Derek Lively is questionable here. Obviously, now you have a lot of mouths to feed on this Los Angeles Clippers side. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, this has been one of the easier spots to, kind of decide on what you're going to do. And it's just been an easy fade for me. A lot of mouths to feed. The pace has been insane. Here's something that's insane to me. So this total, I monitored it throughout the day. It kept climbing. And I have no idea why. I mean, you're talking with Harden on this Clippers team. They went from being – I loved them without Harden. You had Russ pushing the pace. They were playing very fast. And I thought they were the perfect team. Now you get Harden, and, the ball's in his hands. They're averaging like 97 possessions a game. In today's NBA, that is insanely slow. That's New York. That's the Knicks type of basketball. So unless something changes here, I mean, this is a game that I have no interest in on the Clippers side. So they're an easy fade for me. I'm shocked by the total. I think it's way too high. I think it is high just because like the Maverick, if we have high offensive efficiency here by good shooters, that could make it go over. But it's not like these guys are good shooters right now. Like they've been struggling. Paul George struggling. Kawhi Leonard struggling a little bit. James Harden has been terrible. And Russ has never been a good shooter, so I'm not worried about that. I like the Mavs. I think they win, but it's just tough. You could play Luka. I think he's fine, but can it work on this slate? So I'm under on this game. I think it's going to play way under the current total right now, and I feel pretty good being underweight on it. Luka, though, on a slate where we don't have a ton of studs, I think is somewhat interesting. But I'm just, man, I think – I go back to that first game. When you look at prices, it's like I could go Embiid, instead of Luka, or just take a major discount and go to LaMelo Ball. So, I'm going to be under on this game. I feel pretty good about that.
All right, under on this game. Lots of high prices on both sides here, DC. Jason Gordon wants to know, do you have any interest in Derek Jones Jr. at 4K? Not really for me. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'll pass on that. Really tough to get there. Playing alongside Luka and Kyrie, who obviously are going to soak up the vast majority of usage for the Mavericks. Kind of off of them in general. They do look like they could potentially be thin in the front court with Lively. And I think Maxi Kleber is doubtful, Lively questionable. I think you'll see some people get suckered into the Dwight Powell play. I got to recommend against that. We've seen this so many times over the course of his whole career with Mavericks. Gets in the starting lineup, never does anything, right? Even if he gets the minutes. So be careful with that. He's going to seem maybe like a decent value if Lively gets ruled out. I don't think that's something you want to chase. Luka, obviously fine, but give me LaMelo with the discount. Give me Embiid paying a little bit more. I've got Luka third among those three guys. Sounds like AP is the same way. And then the Clippers side, I mean, I've talked about it. This trade for Harden makes no sense roster construction-wise, and we've seen it. They've played 2 games together now, the 4 studs, if you want to call them that. They've lost both games. The pace is down. The 4 of them combined are averaging – it's like 32 fantasy points per game. Kawhi, George, Harden, Westbrook. That's not going to even close to get it done at their price points in the high, right? So that's 8 individual fantasy scores through 2 games. The high is Paul George at 41.75 among those four guys through two games, which, even if you get the high score there, you don't really want that from any of their salaries necessarily. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be injuries and rest for the Clippers down the road, and there'll be times to play them when all four are healthy. I'm just never going to get there myself.
All right, limited interest in this game this evening. Clippers at Dallas. DC, will stick with you. Very high total, very close spread. Oklahoma City started off the year looking very, very talented, especially with Chet Holmgren now in the mix. Oklahoma City favored by 1.5, 231.5 total. De'Aaron Fox remains out, as is Trey Lyles for Sacramento, and Kenrich Williams is out for the Thunder. What are your thoughts here, Oklahoma City and Sacramento?
Yeah, Sacramento side with Fox still out, it does open up minutes and opportunity, obviously, in the backcourt. We know from both this year and previous years, Davion Mitchell just really isn't it from an offensive perspective. A good defender. He's been okay in these 4 games starting without Fox, but I don't think he's someone you want necessarily even at 4,400. Sabonis has been – he had a good game last game against Portland, but a little bit underwhelming this year overall. I think he's fine at 9,900. Hard for me to – again, obviously different positions, but hard for me to play him over LaMelo Ball and hard for me to fit both of those 10K guys in today. So I'm kind of off of him as well. I think the most interesting Sacramento King by a decent margin for me is Malik Monk. I know he's coming off that huge game, 46 points against the Blazers. I think he could potentially do it against this OKC team as well. Going to be fast-paced. I like that it's in Sacramento. Monk is certainly a guy who does, I think, benefit from a pace-up game, right? We saw him struggle the game before against Houston. But they just need his offense, I think, on this team, especially on the second unit. And, I mean, he put up 46 fantasy points. Shot 4 of 16 from the field and 0 of 7 from 3 and put up 46 fantasy points. Gives you an idea of what kind of role he had. 19 free throw attempts, 10 assists. Like, this dude was doing everything for the Kings last game. I think they need him. And this game, like we said, I mean, like you said, JT, very high total here, 231, and a close spread, 1.5. Malik Monk, 6K. I think he'll go. I don't know if he'll go over on that. I'm not sure what the ownership looks like, but I imagine coming off the bench, it won't be crazy. I think he's a very, very strong play at 6K with a lot of upside, especially in this matchup. He's my favorite play on the Kings by quite a good margin. OKC side, another team that's I think is kind of tough when they've got almost everybody healthy. SGA is always in play, but again, I can't play him over Melo tonight personally. Obviously, if you're playing 150 or whatever, yeah, you can mix him in. I think you'd be foolish not to. Matchup is good, but not a priority play for me. And I really don't see much on OKC that I'm feeling the need to jam in there. Chet Holmgren, I throw him in kind of the Wemby bucket. I think he's kind of always a good play as long as his price is reasonable. Certainly still reasonable at 7,800. And pretty good matchup here, too, I think, against the Kings. So he'd probably be my favorite play on the Thunder. That's Chet Holmgren.
AP, Oklahoma City, and Sacramento. Now, when they're not getting blown out, the minutes for a handful of these guys on the Sacramento side have been pretty steady. Malik Monk and for Keegan Murray, of course, Sabonis. But what about Harrison Barnes at 5,200? A significant price drop, and for some reason they continue to play him most of the time between 30 and 36 minutes. Thoughts on the Sacramento main guys and this game overall?
Yeah, I mean, Harrison Barnes is just – you always got to be – like the price keeps dropping, and I see he's getting some ownership. And that's – I go back to that small forward. The issue with the small forward, you're going to end up with these kind of mediocre plays, in my opinion. The usage is really low. He's out there. He's a vet, defensive guy. I don't know. So a couple things with this game. I was kicking myself. The total opened at 225. And, assuming like Davion Mitchell would start like he did against, I think he did twice. And then they changed it up with Keon Ellis this last game. But it was Monk, as DC said, was the key guy there. And what I saw, because we bet after Fox was hurt, it was against Houston where we just hammered the unders in that game, and actually bet against the Kings as well. They just had no offense, like DC said. He hit the nail on the head here. So I think we're going to see more Monk. I think you could also see like a change to the starting lineup here. I mean, when you look at the rotation, the game went to OT, and they closed in OT with it was Monk and Davion Mitchell. So Ellis wasn't in there, and then it was Kevin Huerter, Sabonis, and Barnes. And it was Harrison. So Keegan Murray was the guy that was kind of left out. And so there are some risks there with some of these players, but Monk was just key. I think he's a phenomenal play tonight. I think this is a spot where even if he doesn't start, he's very much in play, especially in tournaments. If you're playing like cash, unless he got the start, then you would want to play him in cash. But I think either way, the minutes are going to be there. It was really impressive seeing him get to the line like he did, and he hit his free throws. Their offense looked better. They're playing with more pace. That's why we saw the total climb 6 points. And we know OKC plays with a ton of pace. I mean, they are one of the faster teams out there. So I think the game environment here is going to be great, assuming we get a similar rotation to what we saw in their last game. So I would be very careful with Ellis if they start him, because I don't see him like being a guy that closes at all. I see him being kind of a warm-up, get things started, and then they get their guys in there. Kevin Huerter, I think, is fine. Murray in tournaments. Sabonis, I think, is fine too. And then it's on the other side, OKC is tough, but you got to, like, Shea I put up there with Anthony Edwards. This dude has so much upside. He's so talented. He's a guy that you should always just be considering in tournaments. You could say Chet Holmgren too, but the price is starting to adjust. So I'm not as excited about him. But you got to like the King side here. The game environment's going to be very good. It's just you're dealing with some tough rotations, and that's what brings in some risk.
478 watching. We are climbing to 225. We've got one game left. We're right now at 187. So need to get about, 38 or so likes. So go ahead and hit the like button, or we will put the plays straight in the Discord. We don't want to do that, but if we have to do that, then that's what we'll have to do. AP, last game on the slate. Stick with you to close us out. The Lakers heading into Phoenix. Phoenix favored by 224.5 total. Both these teams giving up a ton of fantasy points early on in the season. Anthony Davis and Jackson Hayes probable. Bradley Beal is probable, and as well, Devin Booker is out for Phoenix. Jordan Vanderbilt out for the Lakers, and Jordan Goodwin will play.
Yeah, so AD should be well rested. This Lakers team really just hinges on him, and they look bad too with LeBron not in there. But when it's just LeBron and no AD, teams, they can just throw doubles at. They can literally just throw the kitchen sink at LeBron and make life tough on him. And this team is just, they don't look very good. Christian Wood, just an absolute disaster. I know we were all tilting him. I think it's a good blow up spot for AD. He's 9'8". Like he's right there with Sabonis. I think both are really interesting plays. I have them as tagged as elite tournament plays. I'm kind of torn on deciding between the two, and you get a nice discount off of Joel Embiid. So I do think it's a fine spot for AD. Outside of him, I'm not as interested in anyone else on this team. So it's kind of AD or bust for me on the Lakers side. And then the Phoenix side, KD, he's priced way up. They have more mouths to feed now. The rotation's tougher. I'm not paying 5.8 for Grayson Allen. If he goes, he absolutely nuked last game. 16 field goal attempts against. If Grayson Allen beats me, he beats me. I'm not going to go back to that.
You can't pay 5.8.
You really can't. Keita Bates Diop. It looks like a value that could get some love as well. But again, he's one of those guys with a huge floor. So be careful with those type of plays. Bradley Beal just not getting the minutes yet, so I'm not going to be playing him. KD, but the price is fine. So I think this game plays slow too. I think it plays more defensive. The Lakers really, I mean, they're getting crushed on this road trip. They're getting absolutely smoked. I think you finish off the road trip, try to get a win, and the only way they're going to get a win here is on the defensive end of the ball. So I'm overall under on this game. I think AD in tournaments is fine.
AD in tournaments, DC. What are your thoughts here? Lakers in Phoenix.
Yeah, echo most of what AP said. I think Anthony Davis the best play in this game, under 10K, 9.8. I do get a little worried with he obviously missed the last game and then injury scares in the game prior to that, and I think 2 games ago or 3 games ago. So I don't know. It's Anthony Davis, right? I mean, no dude has left more games or went to the locker room more often per game over the last decade than Anthony Davis. It makes me I always get a little queasy playing him, but I do think the matchup looks pretty good. And the price is good. He has been really, really excellent on a per minute basis all year long. So, and honestly, I know he's probable, but he's going to carry that questionable tag on DraftKings. He's had it all day. He's going to carry it all night. His ownership's going to be lower maybe than it otherwise would have been because of it. So I think that makes some sense. If Durant was cheaper here, I would go to him with Devin Booker still out. But 10.2K. Listen, he hasn't been bad at all. He's averaging almost 30 fantasy points per game, but you need for sure 50 plus at 10.2. I don't think he's quite as likely to get there as a guy like LaMelo Ball. So I'll probably be off Durant, but I think he's the best play on Phoenix, and then Anthony Davis, the best play on the Lakers. So pretty much just the studs in this one for me for the most part.
We're totally both off of Phoenix, despite the fact that the last several slates, you've absolutely had to have someone against the Lakers.
Who are you playing?
I mean, it's tough. It's tough, but I think it's Durant here. I think Phoenix needs to start winning some games, and I think Kevin Durant can have a big game here. Price down a little bit. The price was up a little bit higher. He's got Beal back, someone that can actually distribute the ball. Those are my thoughts. All right. We are AP. You've got.
I like that. I like that call. I'm on board with you.
215 is where we're at as of right now. So, AP, it's time for you to head into the executive chamber and determine if we're going to go.
It's close enough. I think we can do it, right? I mean, it's a Friday. I mean,
that's not easy. We give the people a little leeway. We probably should.
Start the way. You know what? It's for the veterans out there. Brittany,
exactly. 100%.
Brandon McNair. It's for the veterans. That's what we do this for. We are giving the plays of the day. Remember, head on over to Run Pure Sports. If you're not already a member, use code NBA15 for 15% off your first month's payment. And look, there's no reason to pretend like anyone other than Kevin Durant is my play of the day, because I just talked about how much I liked him. I wanted to play someone against this Lakers team. He's 10-2. I think he's got 60 fantasy points in him tonight. Kevin Durant is the Eiffel Tower play of the day. DC, we're going from the tower right into Mom's basement.
Yeah.
To find out who the Mom's basement play of the day is. I think I have a feeling I know who it is.
Ooh, we'll see. Big drop off from the top of the Eiffel Tower down into Mom's basement, but we'll do our best.
Take us a little while to get there.
I think the people were spared from my play of the day on Wednesday. I believe it just went straight into the Discord. I can't remember for sure, but we're going back to the same guy. He let us down in a big way on Wednesday night. Mr. Jordan Poole, Donkey Boy himself. I think he gets it right here. He's going to have – I'm seeing him projected. Maybe this is wrong, but like 1 or 2% owned, which –
That's correct.
What I see. That's what I see.
Sign me the fuck up for some Jordan Poole at 1% owned at home. Perfect matchup. And he can get hot at any point. I'll probably be tuning out of the NBA slate 20 minutes in, like I was on Wednesday night after Jordan Poole gets benched for the whole game in the first quarter. But I'm going back to it anyway. Jordan Poole puts up a big boy score tonight.
Zig when they zag, DC is doing. And listen, it could be worse because look, if Jordan Poole does terrible, at least Lola is there now to lick your wounds. So you gotta win either way, one way or the other. AP, Daniel Marnoff wants a YouTube refund, which I don't know how we do that. Maybe we give you your like back and you can use it on Sunday's Off the Chalk show. Daniel, AP, the gentleman's play of the day.
Yeah, all right. So I'm gonna give two. One guy, he's won me 50K twice, and he comes off the bench and he got absolutely roasted on Twitter. I should have tweeted at him with the screenshots. But that's Malik Monk. Now he did it at like no ownership, and I think he's going to get a little bit of ownership tonight. But with that being that like in the 10 Eastern window, and he never like starts, rarely ever starts. And he's 6K. I don't that alone is going to like cap his ownership to some extent. I love what I saw. Their offense looked a lot better. He fits this type of game against OKC where the tempo is going to be extremely fast. And just seeing that spike with the total throughout the day climb by 6.5 points is really telling too to what Vegas thinks. So Malik Monk, and then the other guy, and I'm giving two for a reason. They're both potential bench players. Well, one for sure is a bench player. Maybe you see, the Kings switch up their starting lineup. Unlikely that happens.
You got to give two just to make up for my Jordan Poole pick. So
yeah, well, it's Santi Aldama 4.8, so he is the other guy. So two bench players, Jordan Poole and Kevin Durant. There you go.
Jordan Poole, Kevin Durant, Malik Monk, Santi Aldama, Mark.
The picks are scary. They're definitely scary.
Marquez says the picks are very scary, and I have to say, run pure, baby.